What's going down? It's JDays09, aka Ayala1, aka PlayStation Master Race Extraordinaire. You understand? Now, what we back in here talking about today is the state of Unreal Engine. Specifically on consoles, but even more specifically on PlayStation 5 Pro, because that is the pinnacle of Unreal Engine on console as of right now. Okay, and nothing shows that better than Stellar Blade and its magnificent example of PSSR technology being utilized on a 4K television that goes up to 60 frames per second as the Lord intended in 2025. Now, before we start getting into all the fancy shit going on in the PC race and the fucking, technology that could be used in the PlayStation 6, let's just focus on right here, right now, at this particular moment in time, because this is what we got for the next few years on console. And the reason why that's so important is because consoles, specifically PlayStation, is the master race. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at what the industry is going through right now. You have so much turmoil between, hardcore PC tech gurus and everybody that's talking about the 50 series and how its launch has been a horrific experience all across the board, from the performance of the new cards to the accessibility of the new cards because of shortages and things like that. Like, there's so much going on right now that the entire conversation has intertwined into what I like to call the nano effect. And that is the effect of the actual scientific laboratories that produce the components for these consoles, for these PC components, for these companies like AMD and NVIDIA, who require a strong yield of a very reliable node that can be produced in massive scale. We're coming to a time where it's harder to actually yield results. And that's the end all be all. But how does that translate into the current tech that we see in the games that we're playing right now in 2025? Where games that have been developed over the past 4 years, if not more, maybe a couple years less if you're dealing with a sequel, that you actually get the results that you desire in a console game or PC game for that matter, right? How is the throughput on your PC rig? How is the throughput on a very well efficiently made console that is supposed to target a audience that is not willing to spend as much money in a market where you are having to spend so much more money for the latest and greatest? Why would you then continue to bash? Or, you know what? I gotta take this back. I gotta actually slow down, because I'm a couple margaritas in, but I gotta get this off my chest, because I haven't heard shit about the price of the PlayStation 5 Pro since the launch of the RTX 50 series. And it's not going to change with AMD's new launch. None of that's going to change, because right now the entire industry is focused on just how inefficient of a jump it is from this generation or from the previous generation. And that the cost to performance ratios are at an all-time low in comparison to previous generations, even worse than the 30 series, even worse than basically coming out of that era of COVID, where there were so many shortages in chips, and there's inflation in the market and tariffs being placed all over the globe from the packaging companies in China that put the GPUs together to the actual production facilities in Taiwan that could produce the highest possible technology for our products that we use to create these graphics that we're looking at on the screen right now. We have to come to terms with the fact that it is not efficiently done right now, because the technology itself is hitting a brick wall. And that is, of course, Moore's Law that we're talking about. That computation would either double or triple or even quadruple every couple of years. And that's basically what's been the case up until now. But right now, we're seeing what the industry and what people in the press will like to call diminishing returns. You'll hear the word diminishing returns in a lot of speech regarding the cost of the new GPUs and the new components. But I want to redirect people to what I've been talking about for the past 5 months leading up to the launch of the PS5 Pro and the RTX 50 series, and that is innovation and efficiency in what is possible at the current time is what's going to solidify the market leaders moving forward. Why is it that PlayStation is the only console of the two majors that are, going for higher power, right? Nintendo aside, right? Why are they the only ones that created a mid-gen refresh? How come Microsoft didn't do that? What is Microsoft planning to do next? These are conversations that I will save for a later video. So make sure that you like and subscribe, because there's information that I'm going to be bringing out. It's going to basically not just predict, but completely map out and explain exactly what's going to happen in the industry years before it actually happens. And I say that with the full confidence because I understand where the industry is at right now technologically. I also understand what the geopolitical landscape is worldwide that can, change everything in the blink of an eye. But not only that, what we're looking at on the screen right now is a manifestation of a couple things. PlayStation being the master race, and PlayStation 5 Pro being an innovation that took advantage of all of the best technologies that were possible at the time that it was created. And I'll go into detail on that. And that's what this entire video is about. So grab your popcorn, get you a strong drink, watch some of this excellent Stellar Blade gameplay, right? As my PlayStation 5 Pro continues to update games like Black Myth Wukong and other games that I'll be bringing into more close comparisons in videos moving forward. Now, me in particular, just so that you know, first and foremost, I am a self-sustained PlayStation fanboy that just so happens to be a physicist, a nanotechnology major, somebody that understands the ins and outs of the science but behind all the computation, or at least the basics of some of these advanced features. So looking at it through the lens of one such as myself, I've come to appreciate what Sony has done in innovating for a market that strikes a very fine balance between seeking the innovation necessary and, of course, having to tax the end user, you, the consumer, the result of these technological thresholds, but also giving you what you need to prepare for the next few, maybe 2 or 3 years of innovation before taking the next major leap, while waiting for the technology to catch up to actually execute on a product that can be pushed to the market for the masses. Now, what I can't tell you is I can't tell you what price the PlayStation 6 is going to be, because that all depends on TSMC's their capability of bringing the 2 nanometer node to the market before 2028, and that is years from now. And that's like at least 3 years from now, and that's going to determine whether or not they're going to actually be able to execute on raw power that's going to make Unreal Engine 5 games look the way they're actually supposed to look. Now, that being said, you have to give Epic a lot of credit for creating a universally well-respected and universally supported technology for many developers to jump into to start pumping out some of the games that we are playing today. And this has been the case for decades now, because you go back as far as the PlayStation 3's reveal tech demos where they were talking about Unreal Engine, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 back then, but you still had the innovation that was being set forth, the foundation of what games are starting to be stretching for as far as visual fidelity, image quality, the norm, right? The actual foundation itself. And then you have the flexibility of studios to choose which version of it they want to use, what feature sets they want to use, and of course the software itself being accessible to everybody. It scales to what scale the actual developing studio is capable of. And Stellar Blade is a shining example of what happens when you use really good optimization and planning and approach to not the newest tech, but the best of the oldest generation. And I think Stellar Blade is kind of even spiritually saying the same thing that the PS5 Pro is saying, because technically the 4 nanometer node is supposed to have been last gen, but we find ourselves in a market that uses 4 nanometer for even the 50 series, because NVIDIA is going to prioritize whatever the hell they get out of the 3 nanometer node in 2025 for their AI based GPUs or, major workstation components that they're going to be selling to people that actually do the heavy workload in the market when regarding, whether it be crypto, whether it be AI, or whether it be development and things like that. So they're pretty much reserving it for them and giving the 4 nanometer node to the mass market. Well, if you want to even call it that, because this paper launch that they're going through is just a reflection of just how difficult it is to master even the 4 nanometer node. So what the hell does that mean for 3 and 2? It means that you're dealing with atom-sized silicon molecules that, well, when you line them up, it's really hard to get them to miniaturize any further down without having to change to a whole different element or a completely different approach like quantum computation or even DNA computation if you want to go full blasphemous. Those are things that I've seen in my studies. And to be honest, I'll be honest with you, a lot of that stuff is just not ready for mass production. So what we have right now is a market that is going to explode in pricing and inflation, and is going to absolutely become exclusive because of the rarity of the success of the computational scientific process for making these components. I cannot stress that to you enough, because you're dealing with the nanotechnology that is the most complicated that it's ever been, pushing the elements themselves to the threshold where, in order to get these visuals to get even more incredible, more fidelity, more frame rates, you're going to have to miniaturize more. Going from 80 nanometers, or what was it, like 70, 80 nanometers in the PlayStation 3 to where they miniaturize the die size, but then also miniaturize the node to create the PlayStation 3 Slim and the PlayStation 3 Slim, whatever the fuck that uglier version was that had the terrible Blu-ray disc cover. They were able to lower the nanometer transistor size, but what I'm saying is, as you get closer to the next gen, where we're not trying to shrink the die size anymore, no, at least not that much. Going from the PlayStation 5 base model, 7 nanometers with whatever die size it is, to the 6 nanometer with a slightly smaller die size, allowing Sony to launch the PlayStation 5 Slim at $350 rather than $400, which used to be the baseline model for the diskless drive PlayStation 5 base model. Now, companies don't want to scale down. They want to scale up, and they want to miniaturize the nodes down as much as possible. And where do you see the proof of that? You look at the PlayStation 5 Pro, that's exactly what it is. I talked about that in complete detail on my previous video, okay? If you don't know what I'm talking about, you've completely missed out, and I don't blame you, because not a lot of people know about the videos that I make, and that's perfectly fine. And it's completely up to you if you want to unplug from the matrix and subscribe to my channel, where I actually will explain things in a way that you can understand without having to get too technical. Definitely check that video out. It's about the nanotechnology in the PlayStation 5 Pro and the RTX 50 series, and it is a monument. in the gaming industry. It's completely up to you guys if you want to unplug and actually check that out, because it's going to open up your mind to a whole new way of thinking for what gaming is actually going towards, what direction we're actually moving for. And you know, me being a little tipsy, I'm gonna talk my shit. All right, let me talk my shit while I'm dodging this big ass giga right here, right? You know what I'm saying? Just handling business with motherfucking Eve right here. Unreal Engine is ahead of its time, or at least the 5th variant, right? Unreal Engine 5, way ahead of its time. The assets themselves, and I'm going to go into further detail on this on my next video because I have to do it. I'm looking at PSSR and I'm playing Black Myth Wukong on a 4K screen, and I'm looking at rocks, and I'm looking at the scenery, and I'm thinking to myself, these assets for these textures are so detailed. They make they're like 5 times higher fidelity than anything that I've seen on Unreal Engine 4, and Stellar Blade is a perfect example of this, where you have the utmost sharpest quality, good anti-aliasing, but the textures themselves are definitely dated. They definitely scream last gen, but that's perfectly fine because the game performs so well, you kind of don't give a fuck, right? While on Unreal Engine 5, you play a game like Silent Hill, which just blows you out of the water with the fidelity of the assets, from the wood on the door frame to the stuff on the walls that really make the whole atmosphere of the hotel creep in on you and try to close in on you the same way that Silent Hill actually does when the siren starts ringing and then the hellscape starts to take over. Just the textures themselves, they feel like they're dense. They feel like they're expensive to render. You know what I'm saying? And that's what Unreal Engine 5 is actually doing for the market. And there's other games that I still haven't even tested yet that I can't wait to dive into, but I'm just really chewing through and sipping through some of these other games like a fine wine. And I really come to the conclusion that I feel like I can only appreciate this at its utmost on a console and not on PC, because I don't have the time to fiddle with settings. I don't have the time to fuck around with drivers, and you know, I want to play the game in an efficient way that allows me to handle all of the shit that I got to deal with during my day-to-day life, and then come in here and be like, you know what, let me go ahead and check some of this stuff out and get a really solid experience from the technology that was made at a time where the technology could have been more expensive if it was released sooner, hence PC gamers, or finding a pretty striking middle ground between balance of performance and cost. And I think that PC gamers are starting to lose their edge in that regard, because I'm seeing so many of them complaining about the price to performance ratios of the 50 series. 5% faster of a 5070 Ti versus a 4080 Super, right? Diminishing returns between a 5090 and a 4090, where you have to spend 30% more electricity on your electricity bill to get that very same 30% of power increase for extra frames that are not going to matter, because you're the only motherfucker that experiences it through your eyes alone when you're playing Cyberpunk at over 200 frames per second using 4x multi-frame gen with like 20% more latency. Like, what the fuck are we doing, bro? That's why I like PlayStation, because the developers give a fuck about consoles the most. And then when a game that belongs to PlayStation comes out on PC, y'all are quick to say, oh, PlayStation's multiplayer. No, we're not putting shit on Xbox unless it's like 10 years old, like No Man's Sky or something. What I'm saying is that when it does launch on PC, it's not even the real launch date because it's all a stuttering clusterfuck like Spider-Man 2 or hell, even Silent Hill 2 Remake was a perfect example of that. The stutter, the issues with the throughput and the I/O between the GPU, CPU, and the motherboard. When an APU that's made for console is more efficiently transfer data back and forth. There's no bullshit double data storage between RAM and the system and RAM on the GPU. It's just there ready for you. Which begs the question, what is the most efficient way to make a video game experience? And in that regard, what does that say leading up to the next generation when PlayStation is using the same nodes and launching their product before PC launches their product using the same nodes? Now, again, of course, given the die size is much smaller, so we expect less cores, we expect less shaders, we expect a lot of things to be of lower power overall. But when you're using a 5090 or a 5080, you're paying a really high tax right now on the ability to get the full yield of the actual designed architecture of the chipset that you're using. And you're going for a 5060, I don't know if that's ever going to come out, a 5070 Ti, and you're paying for something that has most of its card as defects. But a PlayStation 5 Pro GPU is 94% yield as a standard. 64 total work processing groups, but 60 of them for parity, or what is accepted and unlocked and used for the PS5 Pro GPU. And you're seeing that on the screen right now. You're seeing that I'm hitting a pretty reasonably believable 4K video. Now, the only thing that may degrade this at all from your experience to mine is the compression of YouTube. But to say that I'm not having to pay for Elgato, not having to go through OBS to record, just using a console, editing on the console, uploading it from the console. I don't use a PC at all for any of the videos on my channel. And the quality is there. You know why? Because the standard is 4K 60. That's what matters for the world to see. But how much are you willing to pay just for what you see? That's what you're paying for. That's the tax. Sorry. That's the tariff that you're paying for to experience it on PC. And right now, when you look at the market, you try to get a 5080, you're not going to find one for less than $1,400. $1,600. I'm even seeing 5070 Ti's going for $900, $1,000. What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? Where I can get an entire console that had a launch that people were kind of concerned about, supply and all that. But PlayStation handled it in a way where they allowed you to log into your PSN, wait in a queue, and order your motherfucking PS5 Pro, goddammit. And then you go to the store and there's still some on the shelves. You know why? Because their planning was much more well executed. That's the fact. That's the end all be all. And I can bet you anything AMD's only holding out on their release because they're trying to get their stock up before they actually launch their product. It's reasonable, right? And then they also want to lower the price and try to be competitive against Nvidia. But Nvidia's not really dealing with consoles other than some fuck around shit they're doing for the Nintendo Switch 2. Now I'm blabbering. But the thing is, what you got to understand is that the engines themselves that drive the market, Unreal Engine is the most common one, and that's the truth. But I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna let you know my innermost thoughts about what I think should happen. Right now, you have Game Pass, right? My Xbox, which is it's a deal if you consider digital as your preferred way of playing games. It's a deal, right? Play whatever you want, whenever you want, but you have to stay stuck into that payment if you want to continue to have your library. That's tricky. That's very tricky. But that's kind of what Microsoft does, right? Because they motherfucking charge you for PowerPoint and Word and Excel and a Microsoft 365 subscription that you got to pay for every goddamn year, when PCs used to come out with that stuff just installed already. They just got to monetize the fuck out of everything. So Microsoft Gaming, let's not call it Xbox anymore, because Phil Spencer's a Microsoft Gaming CEO. That's what y'all are at right now. Y'all are on the whole Microsoft is going full software, Netflix juggernaut, subscription-based, third-party, megalodon in the market. And that's what they want to do. That's fine. Their games will show up on PlayStation, and maybe I'll check out some of them. I'm not interested in Forza when I got Gran Turismo, you understand? Running 4K 120 raw, you know what I'm saying, without any upscaling. Or just 4K 60 with fantastic ray tracing, because Polyphony Digital is one of the greatest of all time. But I might fuck with Gears. I might try Halo, though I've never played any of the Gears or Halo games, because I'm an actual true Sony fan from the get-go, you understand, from the PlayStation 1. Funny story about that, if you want to know my villain origin story. In elementary school, I was not in a rich neighborhood or anything like that growing up in elementary school, but they had a prototype program where they invited all the parents of the students to a parent-teacher conference, but it was the whole classroom. And during this conference, they handed every parent a bag, and in this bag was a PlayStation 1, I kid you not, with homework-based video games that were passed out. And they said, when your kids do your homework, they're going to play it on a PlayStation 1. Did I remember doing any of that homework from those games that they had actually made for it? Hell no. We went straight to motherfucking Hollywood Video and Blockbuster and rented everything under the sun to rent and play on that PlayStation 1. And that just had me hooked from that point on. We ended up getting a PlayStation. We ended up getting an N64. But then we just kind of stuck from that point on. PlayStation. Fuck the GameCube. It was a PS2. Fuck whatever. Everybody fuck with the Nintendo Wii at some point. PlayStation 3, around that time, I was already in high school, so I was able to get my own job and save up for that. But that's a story for another day. So what we're seeing now in the industry is that you have loyalists to their console of choice. And now you have the technology that's starting to hit a wall. So what happens when everybody starts to converge into the same quality of tech? That's what's about to happen in the market, because you're going to run into 3 nanometers, you're going to run into 2 nanometer, and the scarcity is going to be high. And so the only way to actually make products at a more efficient rate is, one, you're going to either have to use an older node at mass production with a higher yield, or tax your consumer and go for the newer technology and just take the L with the efficiency of that technology being made in the laboratories to use for your products. Sorry, that's exactly why the 5090 is the price that it is, going upwards of $2,000 to $3,000 on the streets. That's why the PlayStation 5 Pro is $700, because they miniaturized the node, increased the die size, and made no compromises but taxed you for it. And yeah, I paid that tax gladly, because it was a good balance between what they could do for the developers and what they could do for the consumers. That, while also conserving the power consumption and keeping it very similar, I respect the shit out of that. I do. And I'm looking at it in a scientific way, because that's just how my mind works. You understand? Looking at it from a nanotechnician's perspective, I can understand that that's where the industry is at right now. And for those of you out there that are on the fence about whether or not you should just buy the 50 series or wait till the 60 series or buy a PlayStation 5 Pro, I'm going to tell you straight up, a lot of PC gamers are about to buy a PlayStation 5 Pro. That's the truth. Because you're looking at GPUs that go excess of $900, $1,000. What do you think these pre-builds are going to cost? They're going to cost $2,500 to $3,000 to use a 5070, let alone a 5080, 5090. Those are going to go upwards of $3,000 to $4,000 or $5,000. Or you could just buy a PS5 Pro. and play Grand Theft Auto when it comes out in pretty decent quality with a 4 nanometer transistor GPU that almost 67% more cores than the previous iteration, the base PS5 model. I mean, I keep talking about the tech, but it's not just about the tech. It's also about the execution of optimization that's prioritized for consoles. And who gets the highest priority? The PS5 Pro. You know why? Because they can go. They have the GPU budget to go for 1440p and then upscale to 4K because Sony knows that the meta is 4K 60. It's not 1440p 200 frames per second. It's not 4K 120 frames per second. Right now, it's still 4K 60 because you cannot watch a YouTube video beyond 60 frames per second. You just can't. You can only increase the bit rate, then that may actually help with the quality. But aside from that, that's the foundation. And then the other part of the foundation, which PC does still have an advantage, is the image quality through things like ray tracing, path tracing, ultra settings, all that kind of shit. But we're getting to the diminishing returns point. So you're spending all this extra money for not that much of an end result if you're a content creator. That's what I'm trying to get you to understand. Is that until YouTube supports 120 FPS at 4K or 8K or whatever, you're wasting your money. And you're being selfish as fuck because you're the only one that experiences those differences that go beyond that. And so I think that's really where PC gamers are hitting a wall because they have to understand that that's where it lies for single player games majorly. But and we're going to talk about this too. I got to talk about this. So we're now in an era, and I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again because I really just need y'all to understand that console gamers and PC gamers are in each other's crosshairs now more than ever because of crossplay. And so latency is going to be important. Frame rate is going to be important because that's directly tied to latency. Unless you're trying to do some kind of reach around like multi-frame gen, which can ruin your latency or at least add unnecessary milliseconds to it. What is the industry looking at right now? What is the priority? Because even a PS5 Pro gamer that plays Black Ops 6 on a 60 hertz big screen TV is actually getting an improvement in their latency. Even if it's not tied with higher frame rates, like if they were using like a 120 hertz refresh rate monitor, they're still getting a better experience. Even on a 4K 60 screen. So what Sony's done is they've prioritized the living room experience, the dynamic resolution scaling, hitting the higher end of that dynamic resolution in games like RoboCop, Cyberpunk, so on and so forth, whilst just maintaining that solid frame rate. And then maybe having some fluctuations and troubles that may be bottleneck to the CPU, but that could be addressed in the next gen. I think that they'll be just fine with what's going on in this current gen. And again, I'm very impressed with what the PlayStation 5 Pro has brought to the table. PC gamers, you're just being taxed, honestly. You're just being super taxed, and if you can get a hold of some of these newer products, go ahead and get it, man, if you got the means to do it, and if you don't give a shit about, the price efficiency of it all, just go for it because you can. And that's the whole point of the PC Master Race, is you just kind of don't give a fuck about how much money you spend. You just have to be ahead of everybody else because that's just kind of the toxicity of the PC Master Race, ecosphere between their conversations amongst each other, right? Because they're elitist amongst each other too. And then console gamers, you got the Xbox Series X, which is still a pretty solid console. Doesn't really use machine learning like they said it was going to do. But the PlayStation 5 Pro is definitely the step in the right direction. Now, I'm going to end the video talking about my concern for the next generation. But I want to make a whole dedicated video on it later on. I'm just giving you a sneak preview on what I want to talk about. TSMC and Samsung are right now shooting to get a higher yield for their 2 and 3 nanometer processes. Now, the United States has built fabs in Arizona in conjunction with TSMC. I know that the US is trying to refurbish Intel to try to come back and do something with their lives. But the problem that Xbox is in right now is that they're stuck in the conundrum of having to decide whether they want to try to launch something in 2026 or 2027. And as much as that makes sense because of what it did for the 360 generation, I'm worried about what it would mean if they try to do it right now. Because honestly, Xbox is in this predicament where they're so far behind in sales in this current market that in order for them to want to try to get a higher market share in the next generation, they're going to have to bust their load pretty early, so to speak. I can't really explain it any more simple than that, because if 3 nanometer is not even at the point where Nvidia is confident in using 3 nanometer for their current gaming GPUs and are making it exclusive to their business GPUs or whatever, that architecture, then what does that mean in 1 year from now when it comes to manufacturing an Xbox quote-unquote Prime, or even in 2027 Xbox Prime? What does that mean for the cost of that product? What does that mean for the yield of the GPUs and CPUs for that product? I'm assuming AMD is going to be working with them on that as well. What does it mean for that? Because consoles are going to be more expensive now, if that's the case. But also because you're stuck with 3 and 4 nanometer for the next maybe 1 or 2 years, you're not going to be able to get to 2 nanometer, which is the golden egg of computational leap. That's the end all be all. Once you get to 2 and then eventually, hopefully one day, 1 nanometer, that's where you're going to actually get to run Cyberpunk in 4K with path tracing beyond 60 frames per second. Maybe even upwards of 100, 120 frames per second when you get to 1 nanometer. So that's something that I'm going to talk about in my next videos. I didn't even get to talk about Unreal Engine that much in this because I just had so much on my mind about what the 50 series is going through. But I hope you enjoyed the visuals. And it's kind of hard not to because, obvious reasons. But stick around and you'll hear some more shit in the future.